Good morning. I think we're going to get started. We have for you a presentation this morning regarding how to handle effective meetings for your practice as a means of increasing efficiency and also as a means of increasing communication and improving processes in the office. So we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about this today. If you have any questions throughout, please let us know, and we're going to take some questions at the end as well. What I'd like to do is run through a little bit of basic information about meetings for the office, and then at the end give you some examples of the documents that we use to support these meetings and see if we can't find out which ones are right for your office and how to get them instituted and working well for you. So the topic, running effective office meetings. The challenge when it comes to meetings is that we can get into a problem with the theory or the philosophy having to do with meetings. And we oftentimes will misdiagnose that the meeting is the problem. But sometimes it's actually on the management side that we could take proactive steps to make the meetings what they should be so that we don't in turn decide that the meetings are a bad idea or that they're not working well and stop having meetings altogether. Most practices are of a size and of an activity level that you just can't go without. And I know that you're sitting right with people all day long, you're talking to people all day long within your team, but at the same time, it's very infrequent that we have an opportunity to talk about things freely when there are no patients in play, when there isn't a rush taking place, when there isn't time that we're dealing with a specific problem, to actually focus on the bigger parts of the solutions that we want to come together on. So some of the common mistakes that you'll run into when approaching the subjects of meetings are to have them too infrequently. We often see people who say, no, we have a staff meeting once a year, and we always hate it when that time comes because it's just terrible. Nobody really likes it. We don't get anything done. It goes on too long, that kind of thing. Well, one of the things that could be attributed to is just not having frequent enough meetings.
I'm sorry, Wendy. I can't see. I don't know if you're trying to show the presentation, but I don't see it.
Okay.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you had it up or not.
I do. Oh. Get that fixed.
Okay.
One moment. Having technical difficulties. 1 second. Let's just see.
Yeah, you're not sharing your screen. Oh, there we go.
How's that?
That's great.
Looking better?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So let's just talk about some of these challenges. When we have meetings too infrequently, it can contribute to our view that the meetings are ineffective. And it is much better for us to have those meetings more frequently, have a short meeting, have a really good format for the meeting, have an agenda, have a plan and a desired outcome of what you want to accomplish in that meeting, prepare for it ahead of time, make sure that you have all the documents that you need to hand out to people and a really good plan for how you're going to move through each step. The other thing is that meetings, and we're starting to get into a specific meeting, but when it comes to a thing like a management meeting or a staff meeting, this is not a complaint session. And while the practice may have challenges, and we definitely agree that we need to have staff feedback, it's not a time for us to just say everything that's wrong. This is an opportunity for us to hear what's going on, but then schedule the appropriate meetings, perhaps with a person's supervisor or perhaps within a particular department, to make sure that you guys can get together ahead of time or separately and go over the information that's frustrating. It's not in a meeting common for us to take up every issue, run it to ground, have a complete solution. This is more like fleshing things up, and then management can set about deciding what needs to be done on that issue and at a later time present that solution to the entire team. So one of the things that I hear more than anything else is that people have meeting aversion, right? The idea of scheduling so many meetings, attending so many meetings is an exasperating, eye-rolling, just kind of a confusing and frustrating subject for people. Well, I would submit to you that that's probably because you're either having the wrong meetings, or you're having them in the wrong format, or you're having them at the wrong time of day, or they're taking too much time. So our goal in addressing this subject is that, yes, you guys see patients for a living, and that is where we want your focus to remain. We don't want to take away valuable time that you should be spending with patients to start having meetings for a living. That's not the format that anybody aspires to. But if we can put the right meetings in place for your practice, if we can schedule them well and run them efficiently, then what we get out of the meeting actually has as much or more value than that time that you would have spent with a patient. And the solutions that you put in place become of value to all your future patients and your team members. So some of the meetings that get put in play for any type of a practice are these. Not every practice has every meeting, but even a large practice with lots of departments that has every single one of these meetings, not every person attends every meeting. So there isn't a burden on one particular person to now all of a sudden be involved in 5 and 6 and 7 different meetings and take away from their actual own productive time. So these are some of the meetings that we're going to run through to see if they have value to your practice. They're pretty common in most practices, have some or all of these meetings in place. And they have a specific purpose. So let's talk about what that is. For the huddle itself, some of you call this a muster, some of you call this other things, but this is a short daily meeting that is done to coordinate regarding that specific day. And one of the reasons why this meeting becomes unpopular and falls out of favor with people is because it's usually done incorrectly. That's pretty common that would be the case. Huddle in a practice is designed to be very short, and it is not designed to read the chart and the health history of every single patient. You know, the back office is able to do case planning and patient planning in the back office. The front office is able to do coordination having to do with that appointment, insurance matters, coordination with the patient, paperwork, intake, that kind of thing. So we don't have to reinvent front office work or reinvent back office work in the huddle. What we want to manage are the intersections, the places where back office and front office operations are going to run into each other throughout the day. Perhaps you're overbooked, perhaps you have an emergency, perhaps you have something that's kind of predictable, a patient that needs a little bit extra attention, and even though their appointment block is for an hour, you know it's going to require some more staff effort or some more doctor time to take care of that. Well, the huddle is a great place to talk about this. So these are considered points of interdepartmental coordination. Your back office is coordinating with your front office. And for the purpose of the daily huddle, you from across the room should be able to look at your schedule and see where your log jams and your roadblocks are. You should be able to see things that need some more attention and some more help. And then you can talk together as a team about how to dedicate your resources to those particular problems. Perhaps you're going to add an assistant to the equation here, or have the front office cover with a couple of points there. Perhaps a front office person is saying, hey, don't take this person back until I've had a chance to work with them. If you're going to add a procedure to today, something more than we've already talked about with the patient, I need to talk to them about finances, excuse me. So I think that's the kind of thing that we want to keep in mind. Take a few steps back, and instead of talking about every single patient, talk about the intersections and talk about the potential problems, but also talk about the solutions that are involved. The huddle is something that we can adapt for your office and for your operations. Not every practice is going to have the same huddle, and they shouldn't. But again, we're hoping to help you set up the right kind of an approach to this meeting, especially because it's the one that takes place the most frequently in an office. So look ahead meeting, this is something that is done less frequently, but also used less in practices I found. The look ahead meeting is a front office meeting. It is typically run by the office manager, and it's a once a week meeting for the front office team to come together and to look at the schedule. So you want to take a look at the week that you're in. Say that you do this meeting on Mondays. You want to take a look at the week that you're in, and you want to take a look at the following week. and just look at schedule inconsistencies. Are people in the right places? Have they been allotted the proper amount of time? Do you have the right staff and doctor complement to take care of the patient flow that's on the schedule? Are there any exceptions? Again, this is a big picture look at the schedule. This is basically a training method for the front office staff. Oftentimes in a practice, we'll see that people spend time creating an ideal schedule, something that they aspire to, and that they oftentimes even on their software have kind of shadow boxed on the back of the schedule, so that as you're making appointments, you can see the model for where they should go. And that's great. But when you get away from that, you get away from that for a reason. Your staff are typically not just being defiant, they are oftentimes looking for solutions for how to handle things that they don't have a solution for that is accommodated with just the basics of the scheduling protocol or the ideal day schedule model that you've put together for them. So this is something, finesse in scheduling. It's something that has to be massaged into place. And having this weekly meeting to regard with your staff the upcoming schedule is a great tool. So when you have the meeting next week, next Monday, then week 2 has become week 1 and you're getting a second look at it. Perhaps it's more filled in now than it was. And then you've got another week of productivity after that that you can take a look at. So the look ahead meeting is a great one for optimizing your schedule and for scheduling efficiency, but it has to be done routinely. And it is the kind of thing where the doctor doesn't need to attend that, the assistants don't need to attend that, the marketing department doesn't need to attend that. This is a front office meeting, usually run by a front office lead or by the office manager. A look ahead meeting should take you 20 minutes at most, maybe a little bit more at the beginning, particularly if you find that you don't have an ideal schedule and that you need to develop one together. But I'd say 15 minutes is optimistic, but 20 minutes should do the trick. So the next meeting that we want to take a look at is, the staff meeting. As I said, we have articles regarding the implementation and use and agendas of each of these meetings, but staff meetings taking place more frequently is the key. And there's a very particular rollout to a staff meeting. The first thing that you want to do, we kind of have 3 segments that are outlined here. First thing that you want to take a look at is, do you have any announcements to make? Any updates that you need to brief the staff on? Any upcoming events that require attendance or coordination, that kind of thing. So that's good. You would be surprised how many staff members tell me, I don't know when something's going on. I don't know when something changes. So just having maybe even 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning of your staff meeting for that type of communication is wonderful. The next thing that you want to include at the staff meeting is some kind of a statistical representation. Now, not everybody shares their dollar numbers with the team, and that's fine. But if you do, you can represent some of your productivity numbers. If you don't, you can take a look at your new patient numbers. You can take a look at the number of a particular procedure that you're doing in your practice that you are aspiring to specialize in, say implants or cosmetic work, that kind of thing. It is very difficult for your staff to be motivated and engaged on an ongoing basis if they don't know how the practice is doing. And the only gauge that they have for that is, oh, I feel like we had a crazy day, or I feel like we had a great day. Well, sometimes when they feel like they had a great day, it's because there wasn't enough patient flow. It wasn't a particularly busy day and they weren't stressed to the max. But sometimes when you have a very, very productive day, if there are gaps in the machine, then they can get stressed out by that. And so the productivity is a plus, but the stress is a minus. So we want to take a look at something that you can count and measure and compare to previous time periods and give staff a look at some kind of tracking system that they can understand and engage with and say, oh yeah, that's what it does feel like that. Or, wow, okay, so if that number is so high, it really didn't kill us to do that. How can we do that again and have everybody contribute to the congratulations for a job well done or the solutions when something isn't quite as it should be. The next section that we want to get into here is staff training. And we're talking about little micro group training sessions. It's a very good idea to rotate these between administrative and clinical. If you are working in a dental practice, then keeping your staff abreast of dental procedures, developments in the industry, exciting cases, results of things that you've done, available materials and technology. Those are really good things for you to keep your staff in touch with. It will make their communication with your patients more robust in the long run. And particularly for people who have their own positions in the office, an assistant who's helping with a procedure, a front office person who's filing an insurance claim, their depth of understanding on the clinical side, it's important. And it's also generates some enthusiasm for the purpose of what you're all doing there, helping patients. The other one, so let's say that you're having this meeting every 2 weeks. Meeting one could focus on a clinical topic. Again, maybe 20 minutes of a presentation and some interplay with that subject, some practice, if you will. And the alternate meeting on the second one of the month would then be an administrative meeting. Perhaps you're doing something with your practice management software. You always have something like an OSHA or a HIPAA or some other kind of rollout that's taking place that you need to get procedures in place. Sometimes you're adapting your office policies and job descriptions. Sometimes you're developing things like stats and tracking. ePracticeManager is a training tool that you're using. Perhaps you want to dedicate one of your sessions to that. So it's the interplay of the training session, one being clinical, one being administrative, that keeps this whole topic on point. Meaning that when you're having your announcements or you're having your updates or you're having your general communication, if a common topic comes up among the staff, they have a lot of the same questions, you can put that on the agenda for the next training session. And then instead of having to have individual conversations with each person, you're able to accomplish that all at one time with all of your staff. If you're doing these every 2 weeks, once you get really good at it, you can accomplish this whole meeting in 30 minutes. 3 minutes for announcements, 5 minutes for production analysis and going over some of your graphs, your stats, your goals, things like that, and a 20-minute training session, getting some things on the agenda for future training, answering questions, that kind of thing. This is a really great format for a staff meeting, and it doesn't deteriorate into the complaints because you're being proactive. And even if a common subject that's frustrating for the office is still in play and we know that it's on the agenda for the next meeting or in 2 meetings, then the staff have some confidence in that over time that we're going to get to that. So the next meeting is the management meeting. This is attended by the office manager and the owners of the practice. And this is less of a public format than the staff meeting, but actually goes over some of the same things. You want to take a look at your practice statistics on a weekly and monthly basis. Take a look at the trends of what your production and collections and new patients and some of your specialty statistics are, and then make plans accordingly. If you start each one of these meetings with a statistical review, which should only take you about 5 minutes if you've got everything optimized in ePracticeManager, then you're going to clearly see the trends, that something's going up, something's going down, and that you either need to take reinforcing or corrective action based on what you see with the statistics. The other topics to cover in a management meeting are staff issues. Is somebody exiting the practice? Do you have hiring needs for the practice? Are there training things that you need to talk about with individual staff members or future topics for a staff meeting training? Any kind of staff development is addressed here. The other thing is budgets. We oftentimes are making plans. Say that we have a new patient statistic that's down, and we know that we need to take into account some marketing efforts coming up in the next month for the practice. Getting an idea of the expense and the budgeting for that subject is important. Having an understanding of sending the office manager to go tackle that subject is one thing, but that person needs to know the parameters of what they're doing. The other thing is purchase requirements and purchase details. Sometimes you have an equipment purchase or an integration that's taking place. Sometimes one of your purchases requires a couple other purchases to make the whole thing work. So these last two items kind of take you into the financial side of things. The staff obviously is the HR and staff development part of things, and then the analysis that takes place with the practice at the beginning sets the pace of all of those. So another meeting that we have is an owner meeting. We're going to touch on this briefly because not every practice has more than one owner. But if you do have multiple owners in your practice, it is important for those owners to meet. This is something that we want to do at least quarterly, get people together. And you'll see here that on the statistics section, it's a lot of the same things that you'll look at on a monthly basis in the management meeting. But these are things that you're looking at the trends of these quarterly and semi-annually. And you're also accompanying that with goal setting so that you can take a look at the productivity that you're involved with now, but what your growth and expansion plans are and what training you need to put in place to support that. We've got a section in here for marketing. A lot of that needs to be owner driven in terms of developing campaigns, or at least being the voice and the face of the marketing and outreach that you want to do. And then there's obviously, as owners, you always have legal and rudimentary subjects that you have to be involved with. Financial things, things like licensing, building decisions. It's very, very difficult if we don't make some time once a quarter to just see which of these are in play and how to address them. Otherwise, what's going to happen is an owner is going to come out from a procedure, be tackled by the office manager in the hallway with a question about a pretty big subject that they will then try to answer on the fly, which is probably not the best way to answer a question of that magnitude. So, and then those things get behind, and next thing you know, things are late, things are not done as well as they should be. So when it comes to the owner meeting, again, this is something to consider for when you have multiple owners. But if you don't, this is more like you would take one of your management meetings that the office manager is having with the single owner doctor and do something like this quarterly or semi-annually to make sure that you're taking a big enough look instead of just looking at the quarter or the weekly and monthly numbers. You would take a look at it quarterly, semi-annually, annually. Marketing meeting. Many practices do not have this marketing meeting in place. It's important that you do. All practices need to grow. And if we're talking about a general practice in particular, the attrition rate, how many patients you lose in any given year, can run as high as 8 to 10% for your practice. And that is simply because patients die, patients move, patients change practices, patients change insurance, and you're going to be slowly losing patients out the back door of your practice. Well, we have to throw the front door open and attract enough new patients, not just to make up for that 8 to 10% that are leaving by natural attrition, but in excess of that to actually grow the practice. So one of the things that we put in place is a marketing meeting. I'm going to go over with you what this consists of, but it involves the doctor, the office manager, and perhaps a person who's going to be executing some of the marketing steps for the practice. Again, as usual, you want to take a look at some statistics so that you have a guideline for that things are improving or things are worsening and what corrective or supportive actions you're going to be taking, but also how urgent is it, right? Are the new patient numbers, for example, sharply declining? Then that means that not only do you need to take corrective action and you need to institute new things on your marketing front, but how quickly you need to do it and what kind of results you need to get with what time frame, that's important to keep in play. The administrative part of things oftentimes has to do with allocating the right personnel and the right time segments so that people get the responsibility of executing the marketing steps and they have the time to do it. It simply isn't practical to take an assistant who is responsible for being in the room clinically delivering with the doctor all day and think that they're going to be able to get additional marketing steps done if you don't give them time away from patients and if you don't give them the space and the tools that they need to get that done. But there are also tracking systems that we have for marketing, and we can share all of those with you. The next part of this that ties into it together is planning. So we suggest that everybody have a marketing calendar, that this marketing calendar extend out 18 months, that you have somewhere between 5 and 15 different ways that you are marketing your practice, depending on the type of practice that you have. Not every one of these is a monstrous activity, but having wide variety in the approach that you take to marketing is key. If you're dependent only on one means of marketing your practice and taking in new patients, then should that approach stumble, you're left with relatively little new patient flow. If you have a wide variety and 4 or 5 or 10 things that are contributing to new patient flow in the practice, and one of those things stumbles, you have the opportunity to fix it while the others are running full steam ahead. So the planning has to do with developing, a tracking system and also a marketing calendar that will support you and kind of keep your attention on the bigger picture, not just what is one thing we can do for marketing today. The reason why that's important is because You know, a lot of practices don't have a full-time marketing department. And one of the things that you'll do is take on a lot of marketing tasks, get those done, create some new patient flow because of it, but then abandon those things while you run over and go take care of the patient flow that you just created. Then the new patient flow slows down. You've kind of had that marketing action run its course. Well, now you need to reboot, start over from scratch your marketing actions and do that. Meanwhile, the new patient flow stays down during that time period. Then go over here, recreate your marketing actions. Then you get the resulting new patient flow. Then you stop doing marketing. You go handle the new patient flow. And it's a cycle that a lot of practices are involved with. So just want to make sure that we've got the admin and the planning that supports you getting some more consistency in the marketing of the practice. Before we get into this part, which I would like to do, I'd like to share with you some other documents. These are the supporting articles that you will find having to do with each meeting that we've discussed. These documents are available to you through me. If I'm working directly with your practice, they are available in the documents section of ePracticeManager, and you have access to these all the time. They're important for you to use as you institute a meeting schedule, but also as you continue to have your meetings. Again, the goal is not, excuse me, to have one meeting, decide that it doesn't work and abandon it. That's very much like going to the gym one time, deciding that it was terrible and not ever going again. So when you're developing your meetings, what we want to keep in mind is that you're going to have to fine tune them as you go along. And each of these articles are short, but they also give you some insight into how to troubleshoot or fine tune or further implement a meeting that you want to make part of the practice. So again, on the huddles, this is a very short meeting. It is not something where you have to resist the temptation to have a staff meeting at your huddle. It's not a time to talk about practice business unless you're having an emergency. If there's a water pipe that's broken and you need to let people know that and what we're going to do about that, clearly that's an urgent announcement issue. But you would be surprised at how many times that turns into people talking about the company picnic as an urgent announcement issue, and then the whole huddle goes by the wayside. So here's some general guidelines for you having to do with the huddle. On the look ahead meeting, we've got another article for you. This gives you an opportunity to take a look at what it takes to schedule and start the process of look ahead meetings. So advice on what to do in your first meeting and then how to continue on with ongoing meetings. So this is something that, again, available to you through ePracticeManager and something that you should use ongoing. And I like the steps that have to do with how you roll this out with your staff. Having the respect of communicating openly with your staff about what the general need is for this meeting or for any meeting is quite important. I think that sometimes when you're dealing with your staff and you're getting exasperation from them on the subject of meetings, one of the reasons why is because you haven't shown them the true purpose of why you want to put this meeting in place. If you go over with your staff, let's say that we're talking about a look ahead meeting in particular, that we're trying to optimize the schedule. Even that, they know that you've tried that several times. They were there for the many, many attempts that you've made at optimizing the schedule, but somehow it doesn't stay the way that you fix it or the way that you make it. They know that too. And I guarantee you that front office personnel have frustrations that are equal to yours on the management side of things and the doctor side of things. So if you kind of get across that we're trying to get underneath this, we want to really, really root out what is taking place with the frustrations and coordination points that we need to have on an optimized schedule, that will be real to them. That will communicate to them and they will appreciate that. Continuing on, the meeting article having to do with staff meeting is a bit more specific, but I think that it also needs to be. This will talk to you about your preparatory steps for planning for a meeting, how to schedule and prepare and what the format should be. And then within the format, which we talked about, doing some announcements, going over some stats, and going over some training, it gives you some advice on each of those points. It also gives you a little bit of information down here at the bottom on what to do if things were to get out of control and how to get things back on track. And this, the focus and the intention having to do with this is obviously the frequency and the long-term benefit of what a staff meeting can do for you. On the management meeting, there is some information in the office manager job description that is a narrative and more of a descriptive element having to do with the management meeting. But for this one, we're providing you with just an agenda, right? Here are, steps for you following up on reporting back what you went over at the last meeting and any coordination that needs to be done on that. It moves through the section on the stats, which stats to look at. It moves through the section on the staff and which issues you want to take up, things having to do with finance. And then it gives you a section to create a to-do list or action items and assign those to the right person before your next meeting. So this is a valuable agendized approach to that. For the marketing meeting, we've got basically the same thing, the segments that are involved and what to do in each of those segments. Again, when we get down to plans, you'll see that this is driven by the marketing calendar. When you get to the administration portion, it'll show you things like the statistics to keep, what to report, how to analyze those, how to coordinate having to do with those. So this usually is quite helpful. And then again, for the owners meeting, this is agendized. And in fact, you'll see that it's very, very close to the agenda for the management meeting in format only. It has different topics, but also, for example, once you get into the stats section, you can see that these are quarterly reviews of numbers. These are comparisons with an entire last year's previous numbers. It has to do with, are we tracking the right stats? Are there other stats that we want to track? So clearly this is a bigger picture look. But again, a practice has only so many moving parts, only so many basic components that drive its success and productivity. So you're going to be making contact with these parts of the practice from different angles. And everybody has their own responsibility set within that, but also everybody has their own tasks and they can add their own creativity and solutions to this. What you find when you use effective meetings overall is that there is a bit more of an atmosphere where there's collaboration in the office. You guys are able to come to bigger solutions that are common to the entire practice. They are more embracive solutions and they help more people when you make those solutions come into play. You get to issues quicker, so they don't get so far down the road and they don't cause quite so much frustration for you or the staff because you nip them in the bud. I hope that this has shed some light on the idea of what meetings can be used, how to keep them very short, how to keep them very effective, but also how to not neglect them. And it's an important practice tool and something that I think you'll benefit from greatly in terms of incorporating this into your management approach. Wanted to find out if we have any questions. My contact information is here for you to reach out to me directly and ask any questions that you have. Send me an email for documents that you need or approaches that you're interested in. But I wanted to find out if we had any questions before we end off. Anyone have a question or a comment that they'd like to make about something they've done successfully or had some trouble with? Okay, well, I guess that's it for our meeting. Thank you so much for attending. Feel free to pass this on to others who should be instituting meetings within your practice to give them the guidelines. You can also give this to people in the departments. You can give them the supporting documents and have others help with the implementation so it doesn't just fall on one person. If you have any questions, let us know, and thanks again. All right, bye.